So, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the Z8. I know I said in a couple of videos back that I was going to concentrate more on talking about photography, getting better photos and that kind of stuff. But I've got the Z8, I've had it a week now, I've got some good feel for what it does well, what it might not do so well. So I want to share with you where I am with that at the moment. Do you need the Z8? Should you not get the Z8? What is the Z8 for? Who should get it? So on and so forth. I'll compare it to my D780 and the Z6 II on a couple of things I'll explain in a second. And hopefully you'll get a good idea of what the Z8 is all about. This isn't an in-depth technical review. Loads of people have done that. This is more real world. I'm a wedding photographer. Is it going to help me in my job? What's the pros and cons? So on. Let's have a look. First of all, let me say, I don't think many people, many photographers will need a Z8 or by implication the Z9. I think a lot of people will want a Z8 or a Z9 but don't actually need it. I will explain, hopefully, in the next few minutes why I have that opinion. When I bought the Z8, or before I bought the Z8, I had a couple of concerns once they'd announced it. My first was it's 45 megapixels. I know from experience that the more megapixels you have, the more demanding the camera is in terms of lenses, and the more likely you are to have noise in the image at high ISO. So I've done some shots. I've done some shots with all three cameras to test the ISO, the high ISO, the noise, and I've done some shots to look at the image quality, because again, from my experience, image quality deteriorates with higher megapixels. It doesn't improve. Those of you who think that they should have made this a 60 megapixel camera to get better images are totally wrong. This would give you better images if they'd have made it 12 megapixels. The best images I've ever taken were with a Nikon D700, 12 megapixel camera. That just gives stupendously good, unique character images, which no camera I've owned since has come, hasn't really come close to equaling. It's unique. For image quality, that is the camera I use to take shots which I put on my website to sell as prints and that sort of thing. So I did some shots last night when it was getting dark with all three cameras, exactly the same thing, the same lens, at 25,600 ISO to see how much noise we got. I did three shots, one shot with all three cameras this morning to look at colours, shadows, highlights, tones, detail, all that kind of stuff that makes up the whole character of an image. So let's, and then we'll talk about, I'll talk about those two separate things, and then we'll talk about the third thing, which is the usability of these three cameras, maybe compared to other cameras as well. Noise. So I know the D780 is the best camera I've ever had for noise. You can shoot the D780 at 25,600, and providing you get the exposure right, you don't need to lift it too much in post, you'll have barely any noise. And the noise you have, you just do 10 seconds work with noise reduction and it's basically gone. You do lose some detail, obviously. It's not as good as a shot at 200 ISO, but it's not such a problem that I couldn't give it to a wedding client. I've given many wedding clients hundreds of photos at 25,600, and no one has ever come back to me and said that's soft or that's got noise or anything like that. The Z6 II is very close. And on many shots you wouldn't be able to tell which shot came from which camera. Very good as you would expect, it's 24 megapixels, very similar sensor. Yeah, and it's great at high ISOs. I was worried that the 45 megapixels of the Z8 was going to get us into the realm of having some noise. I'm pleased to say that whilst it's not as good as the D780 or the Z6 II, it's in the same ballpark. Certainly I could do a little bit of noise reduction, maybe just have to move the sliders a little bit more on the Z8 than I would do on the D780 to get rid of the noise or to get it to look the way I want it to. But generally speaking, it's still going to be an image that I can give to the client. So if you're worried about noise, tick that box, it's okay, no problem. Image quality, so all the other things that go to make an image look good. Tones, colours, hues, saturation, micro contrast and all the other stuff. Which is all very subjective. But I took shots, as I say, with these three cameras and I looked at all three and then I rated them. The best shot, by a smidgen, was the D780. Very closely followed by the Z6 II, followed a little way behind by the Z8. If you plan on buying the Z8 for the image quality, don't do it. A 780, the D780 will give you better quality images. The D700 will give you even better, unique looking images. When I say quality, I'm talking about sort of artistic impression. Forget sharpness and that sort of thing. Does it look, straight out of camera, more artistic than another camera? So the Z8, if I said the D780 was 10 out of 10, then the Z6 II is 9.5 out of 10, the Z8 is 8 out of 10. Now, in Lightroom, I can get all three pictures to look exactly the same. I just need to move the sliders, give it a bit more vibrance, add some saturation, move the blacks a bit, that kind of stuff. I can get them to look pretty much identical, but straight out the camera, it's not as good as the other two. It's also not as good as sharpness. Again, people have this impression if I get more megapixels, I'm going to get sharper photos. You will get softer photos unless you've got the right lenses on. If I put my f-mount lenses, which work beautifully on my Z6 II, if I put those on the Z8, and I know this because I've done some experiments, the images are noticeably not as sharp as the Z6 II or the D780. To get the same level of sharpness, I need to use dedicated Z-mount lenses. My 50 1.8 gives beautifully sharp images. I wouldn't say they're any sharper than the 780 or the Z6 II, but they're back into being the same level. So, to summarise, if you want a great camera for image quality, I would discount the Z8. I would also actually discount the D850. Even though it's a DSLR, it makes no difference to the demands that 45 megapixel sensor puts on the lenses and on your ability to make sure that it's tack sharp, that it's perfectly in focus, because if it's not, it's going to look way worse than the 780 or the Z6 II if they're just slightly off in focus. It highlights any imperfections. So finally, the third thing, usability. And we'll start with the worst and work up to the top. The worst is the Z6 II. It's too small. Why Nikon or all the other manufacturers have to make mirrorless cameras so damn small, I have no idea. Buttons are too close together, too small. It should just be bigger. End of story. Customization wise, yeah, you can customize it quite a lot. We've got the U1, U2 and U3 button presets on the top, so you can make it really quick and easy to use for different sorts of things. Viewfinder is pretty good. The thing that really lets this down is the focusing. It's not terrible, but it's fussy. You need to work the focusing system. You need to have the right focus area. You need to sometimes turn off face detect and eye autofocus. The tracking box will track subjects side to side. If they start moving towards you or away from you, forget it. It's probably going to be out of focus. So it's got some quite severe limitations autofocus wise. As I say, you can get, I get decent shots which are in focus, but it's not easy. And finally, it's slow. You turn it on and you've got to wait till then for the thing to work. If it goes to sleep during a wedding, I pick it up to get a quick shot of someone doing something that would make a good photo, and I'm sitting waiting, and it's all gone by the time it's ready to take a photo. That's another very annoying thing with it. Second on the list is the D780, which DSLR, it's instant. It's not very customizable, but of course it's got all the right buttons in the right places and they do the right things, and it doesn't need to be that customizable. It just gets on with the job. The viewfinder is brilliant, and of course being the D780, you do have live view where you've got face and eye autofocus and all those other things. So it's a great camera. I absolutely love it, and I've yet to decide whether this is going to be my second camera at a wedding or whether it's going to be the Z6 II. I'm kind of leaning in this direction, but we'll see. And the autofocus, it's the right size. Sorry, it fits beautifully. The ergonomics are wonderful, and the AF is good. I tend to use auto area AF. Remember, we're talking a focus area that's much smaller than the whole screen of a mirrorless camera. But within that focus area, I use auto area, and it just seems to read my mind. It just seems to know what I want to focus on. If there's a person within that focus area, it will focus on them perfectly. Maybe if I get really close, it won't focus necessarily on their eyeball. I tend not to do that very often at a wedding. If I do, then I would simply switch to single point focus, and it would work perfectly, which I can do very quickly. One button, spin the wheel, changes. But I'd say most of the time auto area just seems to know what I want to focus on, and I love it, and it's very quick. It does a good job. The Z8 is just on a different planet, truly, to any camera I've ever owned. From a usability point of view, it just is, it's just outrageous. Size, it's a perfect size. They've made it big enough, it's the right size, it's heavy enough, it feels absolutely solid. The EVF, whilst it's supposedly the same as the Z6 II, I don't know if they changed the optics. I know the refresh rate is a lot higher, but it's definitely a better EVF than the Z6 II. Customization is mind-blowing. You can pretty much change any button to do anything you want. You've got custom settings menu bank, which means you can change it into 4 different cameras. You can have different buttons doing different things. You can have one in aperture priority, one in manual mode, one in whatever. You can literally make it into 4 different cameras, which you can then access just quickly through the eye menu. You've got the custom shooting menu, where you can have 4 different cameras. So you can mix 4 different cameras with 4 different shooting modes, should you want to. So you could have, high-speed burst for shooting birds, and a particular and buttons that make shooting birds much easier. You could have black and white for doing manual focus, whatever you want. It's truly amazing what you can do. And then of course the AF. The AF is way better than the D750. You've got a large choice of what you want to do, which you can subsequently reduce, so you haven't got quite so many things to look through. But it almost doesn't seem to matter. Whatever auto area you've got it set to, whether it's single point or the whole screen, it just seems to work, and it is so fast. The tracking is absolutely brilliant. I went out a couple of days ago down to London, to central London, South Bank. Thousands and thousands of people, all taking photos of each other and selfies. No one took any notice of me taking photos of them, and I was able to get close to people and get some shots, walk backwards and use 3D tracking, which is just nailed to whatever you put it on. Brilliant. So 1 to 10, 10 to 1 scale. Number 10 is the Z8, perfect from usability point of view. D780, quite some way down, and every other camera, including the D850 and the D500, and maybe even the D5. I've never used the D5, but maybe the D5 would come in like 8.5. The 780 I think is coming in about 7.5 or 8. The Z6 II is way down at like 6. So from a usability point of view, brilliant. And this is what people need this camera for. If you are shooting birds in flight, basketball at night or something like that, and you want brilliant focus, you want to be able to customize it to use different things for different times, then yeah, the Z8 you need rather than just want. If you're looking for image quality, forget it, don't get the Z8. Get a 780, Z6 II maybe, or even consider something like the D700. Okay, my thoughts. Probably in 2 or 3 weddings time I will do another small update, just to tell you how I've actually found it at weddings, show you some shots. We'll go on to talking about the shots and how I got the shots. I'm going to do a bit more talk about photography in future. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know any thoughts you've got in the comments, and enjoy your photography. Cheers for now.